I died serving God for 22 years, and Jesus told me everything I believed about church was a lie. My name is Father Gabriel Morales. I'm 47 years old. I was a Catholic priest who dedicated over 2 decades of my life to religious service. 22 years of morning mass, hearing confessions, teaching in the seminary, baptizing babies, blessing marriages, and performing last rites. I thought I knew God. I thought I was serving Him faithfully. But what I discovered on the other side changed everything I believed about faith, about church, and about the very nature of my relationship with Jesus Christ. Do you know why you're here? I mean, truly, I thought I did. For 22 years, I wore the collar. I stood at the altar. I consecrated the bread and wine. I spoke the Latin liturgy with precision. I taught young seminarians about the sacraments, about canon law, about the proper way to approach the divine. I was respected in my community. Families trusted me with their most sacred moments, births, deaths, marriages, confessions. I counseled the troubled. I prayed for the sick. I buried the dead. I did everything a good priest was supposed to do. But deep inside, in a place I rarely allowed myself to acknowledge, there was a growing emptiness, a gnawing sense that something was missing. It wasn't doubt exactly. I never questioned the existence of God. I never questioned my vocation. But there was this feeling like I was going through the motions, performing a sacred ritual with excellence, but without the presence I desperately craved. I would stand at the altar during Mass, raising the host, speaking the words of consecration, and feel nothing, absolutely nothing. I come from a traditional Catholic family. We were devout, the kind who never missed Sunday Mass, who prayed the Rosary together, who honored the Virgin Mary with flowers and candles. When I told my mother at 19 that God was calling me to the priesthood, she wept with joy. It was the highest honor our family could imagine. I entered the seminary filled with passion, with genuine love for God, with a desire to serve Him completely. The seminary taught me discipline. It taught me the rituals, the doctrines, the history of the church. I learned how to perform the sacraments correctly, how to preach, how to counsel, how to maintain the dignity and authority of the priesthood. I was an excellent student. I graduated with honors. I was ordained at 25 years old, and I threw myself into ministry with everything I had. The first few years were exhilarating. I felt purposeful. I felt needed. But somewhere around year 7 or 8, the routine began to feel mechanical. I would celebrate Mass 3 times a day sometimes, morning Mass, midday Mass, evening Mass. The same readings, the same prayers, the same consecration, the same communion, week after week, year after year. The words that once stirred my soul began to sound hollow. I would hear confessions for hours, listening to people confess the same sins over and over. Adultery, lying, anger, pride. I would assign penance 10 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, an act of contrition. But did anything really change? People would return the next week, the next month, confessing the same things. I began to wonder if we were actually helping anyone experience true transformation, or if we were just maintaining a religious system. Don't misunderstand me. I loved the people in my parish. I genuinely cared about them. I prayed for them. I visited them in hospitals. I sat with them in their grief. But even in those moments of human connection, I felt like something essential was missing. I was giving them religion, comfort, ritual, tradition, but was I giving them Jesus? Was I giving them the living God? Or was I giving them a system, a structure, a set of rules and practices that kept everyone feeling spiritually safe, but never truly transformed? These thoughts haunted me, but I pushed them down. I couldn't voice them to anyone. What would I say? That I was a priest who felt disconnected from God? That I was teaching others about faith while struggling to feel God's presence myself? That I was performing religious duties but felt spiritually empty? The guilt was overwhelming. I would pray harder, fast more, increase my devotions, but the emptiness only grew. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday morning. I was celebrating the 8 o'clock Mass. It was a small weekday congregation, maybe 30 people, mostly elderly parishioners who attended daily Mass out of devotion. I was at the altar, in the middle of the liturgy of the Eucharist. I just finished the consecration and was holding the host about to break the bread. Sunlight was streaming through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the altar. Everything seemed normal, routine, peaceful. Then, without warning, a crushing pain exploded in my chest. It felt like an iron hand had reached inside my ribcage and was squeezing my heart with brutal force. The room tilted, my vision blurred. I heard gasps from the congregation. I saw faces turning toward me, mouths opening in shock. I tried to steady myself against the altar, but my legs gave out. The consecrated host fell from my hands as I collapsed onto the floor. Everything happened so fast, yet it felt like slow motion. I could hear screaming. Someone was shouting to call an ambulance. Hands were on me, rolling me onto my back. I could see the vaulted ceiling above me, the crucifix suspended over the altar, the face of Jesus looking down at me with those painted eyes. I wanted to speak, to tell everyone I was okay, but I couldn't form words. My mouth wouldn't work. My body wouldn't respond. Then the pain stopped, suddenly, completely, and I felt the strangest sensation, like I was being lifted, or more accurately, like I was floating upward. I looked down and saw my own body lying on the floor. Father Ramirez from the neighboring parish was kneeling beside me, performing CPR. The paramedics must have arrived because I saw uniformed people rushing in with equipment. Mrs. Hernandez was crying, holding her rosary. The entire congregation was on their knees, praying desperately. But I wasn't in pain anymore. I felt weightless, free. I was watching all of this from above, and the most surprising part was how peaceful I felt. I should have been terrified. I should have been panicking. But instead, I felt calm, curious, detached from the chaos below. Then I noticed something else, a light, not the sunlight coming through the windows. This was different. It was behind me or around me or maybe inside me, I couldn't tell. It was warm and inviting, and it seemed to be pulling me gently, calling me toward it. I turned toward the light and everything else faded away. The church, the people, my body, all of it disappeared. I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a tunnel. But it wasn't dark. It was filled with this radiant, living light. It wasn't just illumination. It had texture, warmth, intelligence. I could feel it surrounding me, welcoming me, loving me with an intensity I had never experienced in my entire life. It was overwhelming. All the years of feeling spiritually empty, of going through the motions, of wondering if God was really there, all of that dissolved in the presence of this light. And then I saw him, Jesus, but not the Jesus I had preached about for 22 years. Not the Jesus painted in the stained glass windows or carved into crucifixes. This Jesus was alive, real. His eyes, they weren't just looking at me. They were seeing me, every part of me, every thought I'd ever had, every secret doubt, every moment of pride and every moment of despair. Every time I'd chosen religious performance over genuine connection, everything. I should have felt ashamed. I should have felt terrified, but instead I felt loved, completely, utterly, unconditionally loved. Not because I was a priest, not because I had served for 22 years, not because I had performed the sacraments correctly, or taught seminary students, or counseled parishioners. I was loved simply because I was his, because he had created me, because he had always been there, waiting for me to see him, really see him beyond the rituals and the religion. He didn't speak with an audible voice, but I heard him clearly, like his words were forming directly in my mind and heart. "Gabriel," he said, and the sound of his voice saying my name made me weep. "Gabriel, I have watched you serve me for 22 years. I have seen your devotion. I have seen your heart. But I need to show you something. I need you to understand something that most of my people have forgotten." I felt his love wrap around me like a warm embrace, and at the same time, I felt a deep sadness emanating from him. It was paradoxical joy and sorrow existing together. He was pleased with me, I could feel that. But he was also grieved. Not angry, not disappointed in the harsh way I had imagined God's judgment might feel. Just deeply, profoundly sad about something. "What is it, Lord?" I asked. My voice came out as a thought, but he heard it perfectly. "Gabriel, you have given your life to serve me through the church. You have been faithful to the institution, to the rituals, to the traditions. But in the process, you lost me. You lost the relationship I longed to have with you. You chose the system over my presence. You chose religious duty over intimate communion. And you are not alone. Millions of my people have done the same thing." His words pierced me, but not with condemnation. With truth, with recognition. I had known it. Deep down, I had always known it. The emptiness I felt wasn't because I lacked devotion. It was because I had devoted myself to religion instead of relationship. I had served the church, but neglected the living God. "I want to show you something," Jesus said. "I want you to see what has happened to the places built in my name. I want you to understand why so many of my people feel distant from me, even while sitting in pews every Sunday." He reached out his hand and I took it. The moment our hands touched, everything shifted. We were no longer in the light. We were standing in a church, but it wasn't my church. It was somewhere else. A large, beautiful cathedral with high vaulted ceilings and ornate decorations. Gold everywhere, marble floors, expensive artwork, rows and rows of wooden pews. A service was happening. The pews were full. People were singing hymns. A priest was at the altar performing the liturgy with precision. Everything looked holy. Everything looked proper. But Jesus turned to me and his eyes were filled with tears. "Gabriel," he said, "look closer. What do you see?" I looked. At first, I saw what I expected people worshipping, following the ritual, participating in the Mass. But then Jesus gave me something like spiritual sight. I began to see beyond the surface. I saw people's hearts, and what I saw broke me. Most of the people in the pews were going through the motions, standing when they were supposed to stand, kneeling when they were supposed to kneel, reciting prayers they had memorized. But their hearts were far away. Some were thinking about work, some about their problems, some about what they would eat for lunch. They were physically present but spiritually absent. And it wasn't just the congregation. I looked at the priest performing the Mass. He was doing everything correctly. Every word was precise. Every gesture was proper. But there was no life in it. No passion, no presence of the Holy Spirit. Just religious routine. I recognized myself in him. I had been that priest. For 22 years, I had been that priest. "This isn't worship," Jesus said quietly. "This is performance. This is tradition without transformation. This is religion without relationship. I came to give people life, abundant life, intimate connection, freedom from sin and shame. But they have turned my gift into a system, a set of rules, a weekly obligation. They have made church into something I never intended it to be." "But Lord," I said, "we're trying to honor you. We're following the traditions, the sacraments, the liturgy. We're trying to do things the right way." Jesus looked at me with such profound sadness that it made my heart ache. "Gabriel, I never asked for rituals. I asked for relationship. I never asked for religious performance. I asked for love. I didn't die on the cross so people could attend weekly services and check a box. I died so they could know me, really know me, so they could walk with me daily, talk with me constantly, experience my presence in every moment of their lives. But instead, they have built walls around me, walls of tradition, walls of religion, walls of formality, and those walls keep them from the very thing they need most." I felt something breaking inside me. Everything I had built my entire adult life on was crumbling. All the certainty, all the structure, all the religious achievement, it was all meaningless if it wasn't leading people into genuine connection with Jesus. "What you're about to see will break your heart," Jesus said, his voice filled with both compassion and urgency. "But it will set you free." He gestured, and suddenly we were somewhere else. Another church, then another, then another. We moved through hundreds of churches across the world, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Pentecostal, every denomination you can imagine. And in each one, I saw the same thing. Religion without relationship. Tradition without transformation. People gathering in buildings, singing songs, hearing sermons, participating in rituals but never truly encountering the living God. I saw pastors who preached eloquently but had no intimacy with Jesus. I saw worship, Leaders who sang beautifully but whose hearts were filled with pride and performance. I saw congregations who argued about doctrine while ignoring the poor and the broken. I saw churches that looked successful from the outside, large buildings, big budgets, full pews, but were spiritually dead on the inside. And Jesus wept. I watched tears stream down his face as he showed me what his church had become. Not all of it. There were pockets of genuine faith, people who truly knew him, communities where his spirit was alive and active. But they were the minority. Most of what bore his name had become something he never intended. I saw what 99% of churches have become, I whispered, and it terrified me. And I had been part of it. For 22 years, I had been part of the very system you came to free people from. Jesus looked at me, and despite his sorrow, there was hope in his eyes. Gabriel, this is why I brought you here. This is why I'm sending you back. I need you to tell them. I need you to show them that church was never meant to be a building or a ritual or a weekly obligation. Church is my people alive, empowered, transformed, walking in intimate relationship with me. That's what I died for. That's what I'm calling them back to. I'd witnessed something in those sacred buildings that made me weep. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of recognition. I had been part of the very deception he came to warn against. And that's when everything shifted. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with something I can only describe as divine heartbreak. Come, he said. Let me show you what breaks my heart every single day. In an instant, we were standing in the back of a massive church. Ornate stained glass windows filtered colored light across polished wooden pews. An organ played reverently. The sanctuary was packed, hundreds of people dressed in their Sunday best. The priest at the altar was performing the liturgy perfectly, every gesture precise, every word correct. It looked like heaven on earth. But Jesus leaned close and whispered, "Look deeper." And that's when I saw it. The hearts. I could suddenly see into the hearts of everyone in that building. The priest at the altar performing flawlessly, his mind was calculating how his sermon would impress the bishop. The deacon assisting him was mentally rehearsing his next promotion opportunity. The congregation members sitting with folded hands and bowed heads, their minds were everywhere but with God. One was planning her grocery list. Another was nursing a grudge against the woman 3 rows ahead. Another was checking off his religious duty for the week so he could feel righteous. Beautiful rituals. Empty hearts. Jesus turned to me, and I saw tears streaming down his face. They honor me with their lips, he said, but their hearts are far from me. They perform for approval, not for love. My chest tightened. I felt his pain like it was my own. But I gave everything for them, he continued. I didn't die to create a system. I died to restore a relationship. Before I could respond, the scene shifted again. Another church. This one was different, more academic. A seminary classroom. Students sat with open Bibles, notebooks filled with theological arguments. The professor was brilliant, articulating complex doctrines with precision. Again, Jesus said, "Look deeper." And I saw it, pride, spiritual pride everywhere. These students weren't pursuing truth to know God better. They were collecting theological ammunition to prove themselves right and others wrong. The professor wasn't teaching to ignite love for Christ. He was performing intellectual gymnastics to maintain his reputation as the smartest theologian in the room. Knowledge without love. Correctness without compassion. Theology as a weapon instead of worship. Jesus shook his head slowly. They study Scripture to master it, he said, but they refuse to let Scripture master them. They want to be right more than they want to be mine. The pain in his voice was unbearable. And then we were somewhere else. A contemporary church, massive screens, flashing lights, a worship band that sounded like a concert. Thousands of people with hands raised, voices singing. The energy was electric. Surely this one is different, I thought. But Jesus said again, "Look deeper." And I saw the same emptiness. The worship leader wasn't leading people to Jesus. He was building his platform, counting his social media followers, planning his next record deal. The pastor in the wings was calculating how to increase attendance numbers to boost his conference speaking opportunities. The congregation was chasing emotional experiences, collecting spiritual highs like entertainment, but their lives outside these walls were indistinguishable from the world around them. Performance Christianity, spiritual entertainment, self-focus disguised as worship. Jesus turned to me and his heartbreak deepened. "They come for what I can give them," he said, "but they don't come for me. They want my blessings, but they don't want my presence. They want my power, but they don't want my character." I felt like my chest was being crushed. "Is it all like this?" I asked. "Is there anyone who gets it right?" For the first time, Jesus smiled. Not a full smile, but a glimmer of hope. "Come," he said. We appeared in a small living room. Maybe 15 people gathered in a circle. No stage, no performance, no ritual precision. They were praying, really praying, confessing struggles, encouraging one another, opening scripture not to prove points, but to encounter him. I saw their hearts, and they were different. Messy, yes. Imperfect, absolutely. But real, genuine, hungry for him, not for appearances. "These are the ones," Jesus said softly. "Maybe 1% of those who call themselves mine. They understand that I'm not looking for perfect performance. I'm looking for authentic relationship. They know the difference between religion and reality." I watched them in wonder. No theological pride, no spiritual performance, no self-focus. Just raw, honest people desperately pursuing Jesus because they loved him, not because they wanted something from him. Jesus turned to me and his eyes locked onto mine. "Gabriel," he said, and the sound of my name on his lips pierced straight through me. "You've spent 22 years performing. Beautiful liturgies, correct theology, impressive sermons. But when was the last time you sat with me in the quiet and simply loved me? When was the last time your heart broke for what breaks mine instead of calculating how to impress your bishop?" His words weren't harsh. They were tender, devastatingly tender. And they shattered me because he was right. Every ritual I performed, I was thinking about execution. Every sermon I preached, I was calculating the response. Every prayer I prayed publicly, I was aware of my audience. I had become a spiritual performer, a religious actor, and I didn't even realize it. "I didn't give my life to create performers," Jesus said, his hand on my shoulder. "I gave my life to create lovers, people who would pursue my heart, not my approval. People who would seek my presence, not my position. People who would care more about knowing me than being known for knowing about me." Tears poured down my face. Real tears, not the spiritual tears I had performed in church. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I've wasted so much time." But Jesus pulled me close. "It's not wasted if you turn now," he said. "Go back. Tell them. Tell them that I'm not impressed by their religious credentials or their theological precision or their worship performances. Tell them I want their hearts. Tell them the difference between ritual and relationship, between religion and reality." "But they won't listen to me," I protested. "I'm just one priest." Jesus smiled fully now. "The 99% won't listen," he said. "They're too invested in their systems, too comfortable in their performances. But the 1%, the hungry ones, the ones who sense something is missing in their beautiful rituals, they'll hear you, and that 1% will change everything." He stepped back, and I felt the weight of his commission settling on me like a mantle. "Gabriel," he said one final time, "don't go back and give them more religion. They have enough of that. Give them me." And then everything exploded into light. "Gabriel," he said one final time, "don't go back and give them more religion. They have enough of that. Give them me." And then everything exploded into light. I gasped, my lungs burning, my chest heaving. Fluorescent lights above me, beeping monitors, voices shouting, hands pressing on my chest. I was back in the hospital room, back in my body. A doctor leaned over me, eyes wide with shock. "Father Gabriel, you're back. You were gone for almost 4 minutes." But I wasn't thinking about medical explanations. I was thinking about what I had seen, what Jesus had shown me. The 99% who had turned faith into performance. The 1% who understood the difference. And my own 22 years of religious masquerade. Everything had changed. In the weeks that followed, I didn't immediately abandon the priesthood, but I abandoned the performance. I stopped calculating responses. I stopped executing rituals mechanically. I started sitting in silence with Jesus, learning to love him instead of impress him, I started preaching differently, caring more about truth than applause. I started challenging my congregation to examine their own hearts. Are you performing or pursuing? Are you executing religious duties or experiencing relationship? Are you part of the 99% who honor God with your lips while your hearts are far from Him? Or are you part of the 1% who genuinely love Him? Some people left my church. They didn't like the new message. They wanted me to go back to making them feel religious while leaving their hearts unchanged. But others stayed. Others woke up. Others began their own journeys from performance to relationship. And that's what I'm here to tell you today. You don't have to wait until you die to discover this truth. You don't have to have a near-death experience to understand the difference between religion and relationship. Jesus is showing you right now, through my story, what He showed me in that divine encounter. Look at your own faith. Be brutally honest. Are you performing for approval, or are you pursuing Him for love? Do you care more about being seen as spiritual, or actually being close to Jesus? Are your rituals drawing you into His presence, or are they substitutes for His presence? Because here's what I learned. Jesus doesn't want your perfect church attendance. He doesn't want your theological correctness. He doesn't want your impressive spiritual resume. He wants you, your real heart, your messy, imperfect, hungry for something genuine heart. The 99% will tell you that good works, correct doctrine, and religious performance are enough. They'll make you feel spiritual while your soul stays empty. But the 1% knows the secret. It's all about relationship. It's all about genuinely knowing Him, loving Him, pursuing Him, not for what He can give you, but for who He is. So I'm asking you right now to stop performing and start pursuing. Stop executing religious duties and start experiencing divine relationship. Because Jesus didn't die to give you a system to follow. He died to give you Himself to know. And if you make that shift, if you move from the 99% to the 1%, everything changes. Not because you've mastered the rituals, but because you've been mastered by love. Not because you've impressed God with your performance, but because you've been transformed by His presence. And if you make that shift, if you move from the 99% to the 1%, everything changes. Not because you've mastered the rituals, but because you've been mastered by love. Not because you've impressed God with your performance, but because you've been transformed by His presence. That's the truth Jesus showed me when I died for 4 minutes. That's the truth that changed my entire life. And that's the truth I'm giving you right now. Don't wait until you're standing before Him to realize you've been performing instead of pursuing. Don't wait until it's too late to discover that religion and relationship are not the same thing. The invitation is open. The 1% is waiting for you. Jesus is waiting for you. Not your performance, not your credentials, not your spiritual resume, just you, your real heart, your genuine hunger for Him. So what will you choose? Will you stay comfortable in the 99%, honoring God with your lips while your heart stays far from Him? Or will you join the 1% who understand that it's all about authentic relationship? The choice is yours. But I'm telling you, from someone who died and came back, from someone who saw what breaks Jesus' heart and what makes Him smile, there's only one choice worth making. Choose relationship over religion. Choose pursuit over performance. Choose the 1%. Because that's where Jesus is, and that's where real life begins.